Hello, VOXRVA attendees.
Thanks.
Welcome to our March event here at Vozen. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for finding your way back here to the barrel room. You know, it feels very speakeasy-y. Is that how it's said? Speakeasy-y?
Yeah.
Speakeasy, yeah.
I think he's a rap artist.
Yeah, he probably old school rapper, yeah. That raps about bathtub gin, I think, yeah. My name is Michael Bigot. I am the host of VOXRVA. If you are unfamiliar, how many people have, this is their first time at VOXRVA? Wow, that's amazing, that's awesome. How many people have been here before? We got a few returning? Okay, great. Hopefully that's a good sign that the newbies are gonna be coming back next time for our next event in April. If you are not entirely familiar about VOXRVA, we are a collective of creators and storytellers here in Richmond, Virginia. The roots here come back from 2016 as a podcasting group and has grown over the years to include all sorts of different creators and performers and storytellers. And tonight's event is about celebrating the voices of Richmond, all shapes and sizes, and all sorts of different types of stories. So you're gonna get some funny stories, you're gonna get some more intense or like emotional stories. You're gonna get a really good understanding about how people get through these transitions in life. And those transitions can look like a lot of different things. It could be changing relationships or changing where you live, different parts of your life. All of our lives are just this chain of different moments in our lives that are put together. And the transitionary period of our lives is oftentimes makes up more of our lives than the times that are steady. So that is something that we should celebrate, is our ability to transition between these different points in our life. And we're gonna have a lot of people talking about exactly that. And that, again, looks like a lot of different things. Before we get started, some housekeeping. VOXRVA only exists because of people showing up to the events and the storytellers from the community. So if you're interested in attending our events or speaking, being one of our storytellers at the events, make sure to sign up on our mailing list over on the barrel over here so that you get regular updates in our newsletters and everything, as well as checking out voxrva.org. That's our website where you can submit your form with your story to let us know what you want to talk about. And we will likely contact you and talk it over and maybe even work with you a little bit to get it to where it needs to be a storyteller. There isn't really like a wall here, you know. This is all volunteer. This is all of us just here to celebrate storytelling. So if you feel brave and you want to get up and tell a story, definitely reach out to us and we'll let you know the next events, what the themes are, and we'll get you up here. Also, I want to thank all of the VOXRVA folks that have helped make this happen. On sound is Steve Lack, making us sound nice and pretty. The coordinator that makes sure that everybody shows up at the same place at the same time, as well as knowing what the heck we're doing. We got Meg Lindholm. And I just get to talk pretty, so that's my whole job. And Reese Williams as well is, I don't think she's here tonight. Is Reese here? No. Oh, okay. Reese wasn't able to make it. Reese does basically whatever is the utility person. He gets to do all the stuff that we don't have time to do. So if you're interested in volunteering, helping out, also just reach out to us through info@voxrva.org, and we're always looking for additional help. So without further ado, let's talk about what we're doing tonight. I'm just the host. I get to hang out in the back and drink beer while everybody else does the hard work. And the person doing most of the hard work tonight is a local legend in Richmond that has done so much. I'm going to make it embarrassing for you to come up here because, like, this is like that Bugs Bunny where he's a first baseman and pitcher and batter and catcher all at the same time. That is our MC for the evening. She does a little bit of everything all the time and is always busy and somehow does it flawlessly. I don't know. Without further ado, let's give it up for Michelle Mercurio.
Flawlessly.
That is my flawless entrance. I did not knock over the speaker.
I am excited to be here tonight. I also am excited to meet Laura, our photographer for this evening. Thank you for being here. I was super excited to see Joey and Aaron from Double Take be here tonight as well. Many of you I recognize from Creative Morning, so I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much. This is originally the topic of transitions, which was rescheduled from January and our lovely ice storm. But we have some fabulous storytellers here tonight. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the first one to you. Our first storyteller is Rachel Pater. She's also my neighbor. Rachel is enjoying middle age armed with an unofficial ADHD diagnosis and an insatiable desire to be up in everyone's business. She spends her days either teaching at VCU, also flawless right there. She spends her days either teaching at VCU, working with unhoused families, giving historic trolley and Segway tours around our city, or driving a school bus for a local nonprofit. She's a licensed minister who is down to officiate your wedding or your funeral. She has started what will certainly be a mediocre ice hockey career. She lives in Union Hill with her wife, Jess, and daughter. Rachel is going to help kick things off by telling her story this evening, which is called The Tandem. Please welcome Rachel Pater to the stage.
Am I good, Steve? Good? Okay. When my dad used to tell stories, he would always start by saying, "I'll never forget." He would say, "I'll never forget." He was kind of a close talker, so he would get up in your business, and he would say, "I'll never forget," and launch into a story of which he had many. He had many stock stories that my brothers and I and my mom had heard 1,000 times before. He was an immigrant from the Netherlands. He and his family had an egg delivery service on the south side of Chicago when they immigrated. He later worked in a steel mill. He worked as a waterbed salesman until he settled into his career as an attorney. So my dad might come up to you and say, "I'll never forget, I was on the south side of Chicago and I was delivering eggs, but I really wanted to play baseball. And so I fumbled one of the eggs and my dad saw me. A little while later I fumbled and dropped another one. By the third time my dad said, 'Ryan,' which is his Dutch name, he said, 'Go off,' and I got to play baseball." He would often accost smokers and tell them how he quit smoking, which is not what you want to hear when you're actively smoking, but he would say, "I'll never forget, when I quit smoking, I decided that I could smoke a cigarette, but I had to eat one first." And this story he always told very viscerally, and he would talk about how he rolled his cigarette around in his hand, and finally he popped the filter off and he ate it, got so violently ill that he never had another cigarette again. My dad, if he was known as anything besides a storyteller, he was known as a cyclist. And growing up, when I was growing up in West Michigan, my dad had at least 7 or 8 bikes at any given time, even though we were just solidly middle class. And my mom was always kind of annoyed by this, and he would always justify every single bike. He would say, "Well, this bike is the one I just cruise around town in, and this is my ultralight bike, which I need for races, and this one, it has panniers on it, so I can go get groceries," which he never did. But he had a reason for all the bikes. But the one bike he never had to justify was a 2-person bike. He got this bike because every month he received the Nash Bar magazine. This is an old school catalog that sold just bikes, and he would pore over it every month, just like a kid getting a highlights magazine. And this one month he saw that they had misprinted the price of a 2-person bike. It was supposed to be $2,500. This is the early 90s. Tandems were relatively new, and they had misprinted it and wrote $250. Now, I don't know how many people called or how many people were able to get the bike at the misprinted the print, but my dad by this time is a professional arguer, and so he got us a cherry red tandem. And I was just about the right age. My brothers were a little bit too old, but I was 8 or 9 years old, and I loved riding in the back of this cherry red tandem. We'd ride around the neighborhood, and kids would always see us, and they'd be like, "Look, a two-person bike." And my dad would always, he would try to preempt them, and he would call over his shoulder to me when we would see a kid riding. He'd be like, "Look, Rach, a one-person bike." And I was so proud to ride with him on the back of this tandem bike. One of the last rides that I took with him was a 50-mile bike race. And I was about 12 years old, preteen. It's not as cool to be seen on a tandem bike with your parent. But he convinced me to go. And about halfway through, I was kind of over it. And I remember I was complaining. And he said, "Why don't you just put your feet up on the crossbar and just chill out?" I was all of 90 pounds soaking wet. And so he just did the race kind of by himself with me in the back. And I just remember sitting behind him, and I ate the snacks that my mom had packed me in the little pouch beneath his seat. Fast forward to finishing undergrad in Michigan, I decided to move to Denver, Colorado to teach. I packed up my two-door Ford Focus hatchback, not a lot of room, and definitely not a lot of room for a bike. So I left my bike behind in Michigan and moved to Denver. My mom and dad visited within like 2 months, and within 15 minutes of my dad sitting in my apartment, he got antsy and he's like, "Rach, let's go to the bike store." So I thought we were going to get him a bike, but in fact, he talked me into getting a bike that I had no business buying or getting. He's like, "You need the carbon fiber frame, and you need the Shimano gears," and he's upselling me on this bike. So we take it to the cash register, and I did the whole, like, "Where's my wallet?" kind of thing, And if you've never tried that trick, you are definitely not a youngest child. My dad bought the bike very generously for me, and I started riding in Denver. I started commuting to the youth homeless shelter that I worked at, about 6 miles across town. I started riding recreationally, and I started riding on the Cherry Creek bike path. I did a couple races at duathlon, didn't get very serious, but I was on my bike a lot. Toward the end of my 10 years in Denver, I was doing some online dating, as one does, and I met someone. We started talking and vibing, messaging back and forth, and we were trying to figure out when we could meet up. She was very busy. She was training for a 500-mile bike ride from San Francisco to LA, the AIDS ride. And so I was like, this bodes well. This woman rides a bike. So she goes and does her trip. We meet up and we start dating that summer, 2015. In the fall, we were taking a longer bike ride down the Cherry Creek path. This is a protected bike path, so you think you're going to be safe. But about 5 miles outside of town, a guy came around the corner at what seemed to me like 50 miles an hour, and he took both of us out. Jess got the brunt of it, and her finger bent back in a way that I never want to see a hand look again. You can ask her later. She still has a bent finger, bent oddly the other way. And it really rattled me, I think more so than her, because I was behind her and kind of saw the whole thing go down. So I was nervous to bike for a while, but I got back on and rode through the winter, through that spring, and I kept riding until May of 2016, when I got a call from my mom. And my mom said that my cousin Ryan, who was my age at the time, who was living in Idaho and training for a triathlon, he, like me, was the kid of an immigrant, my dad's sister's kid, and he was hit and killed on the side of the road when he was biking by an impaired driver. I went out to Idaho about 2 months after his funeral, and I went with his wife. They have 4 kids, ages 10 months to 7 years old, and we went and visited the ghost bike that was put up for Ryan by the firefighters. Ryan himself was a firefighter, so the first responders at the scene were his buddies. And I went out to the ghost bike, and I don't know if you've ever seen a ghost bike from someone that you know, but we kind of surveyed the scene, and his wife, Amy, picked up a plastic water bottle holder, and she said, they didn't really clean up. She just took it kind of matter-of-factly, and I remember holding it in my hand and thinking, how did this survive? And Ryan didn't. And I went to the coffee shop that Ryan loved to go to. He was very popular about town, and the barista talked to me about him and gave me some of his favorite coffee beans. And I went back to the ghost bike, and I spread the beans in front of the bike, and I said goodbye to Ryan. I also said goodbye to biking. I stopped biking in May of 2016, and later on that year, Jess and I decided to move here to Richmond, Virginia. I did put my bike in our U-Haul and bring it out, but then it just started taking up space in our already kind of too small shed, and it was making me depressed. And so a few months in, I decided to sell it. And I sold it for dirt cheap. This woman came and got it, and I remember she was training for a triathlon, and I was so jealous of her that she could just go on blithely and ride a bike like it was a safe thing to do. But I let go of my bike, and I don't think I ever would have gotten another one, except we had our daughter, her name's Holland, in 2019, and when Holland was a couple years old, she expressed interest in riding a bike. And I believe one of my biggest jobs as a parent is not to pass along my baggage to my kid, and so even though I didn't want her to, we got her a Strider bike, took her to Jefferson Park where we live, and I was able to walk around with her. And then she got a pedal bike, and I had to start running next to her. And then she got faster, and I started longboarding next to her. And then it was clear that I was going to have to get a bike myself. So I got a bike, and I rode next to Holland around the streets of Churchill. I was teaching her, the difference between a four-way stop and a two-way stop, and trying to get her to understand how to be as safe as she could on a bike. And I'm sure our neighbors who saw me probably saw someone who was teaching their kid to ride a bike, when in fact Holland was actually teaching me to ride a bike again. I got back on that bike, and then I got really interested in mountain biking, and so I started biking off-road, which felt safer for me. Then I got a commuter bike so that I could go to VCU, and then we got a cargo bike, which is kind of like a tandem. Holland rides in the back, but she doesn't have to pedal at all because it is an electric bike, and I get to pick her up at school because we are a one-car family. Last May, I was able to ride myself on my first 100-mile ride. It was a Century. It's the Cap to Cap. It's this May 9 and 10. If anyone's a biker and wants to do it, it's a great race. But I rode from Richmond to Jamestown and back on the Cap Trail. And I would say that that was my favorite and most memorable bike ride of the last bit of my life, but there was one more that happened last summer. My dad has had some changes in his health. He has been diagnosed a few years ago with dementia and Alzheimer's. So though he is alive, he's no longer known as a storyteller, and he's no longer known as a cyclist. He can't remember his stories, and his balance is too far off, and he can't bike anymore. I called my brother, who still lives in West Michigan, in anticipation of our July trip last year, and I said, "Do you still have the tandem bike?" And he had been storing it for like 20 years, and I asked him to take it to the bike store and tune it up. And in July of 2025, I got to ride 20 miles with my dad on the tandem bike, with me in the front and him in the back. I hope I never forget it. Thank you.
I did watch you longboarding next to Holland in the park one day. And I hope you never forget that ride. Thanks, Rachel, for sharing that beautiful story. Next up, we have Reverend Robert Moore. He's been ordained into the Unitarian Universalist ministry, and he and his family moved from Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas to Richmond in the summer of 2022. He works at Travelers Insurance where, in addition to his regular duties, he leads bi-weekly mindfulness sessions with a core group of leaders. He has been trained as a spiritual director since 2018 and is an affiliated community minister at First UU Church here in Richmond. He also sings with the Richmond Men's Chorus. Rob's story is called Red Light.
Nope.
Welcome, Rob.
But you were a nice, North Star. Or middle age.
So I found myself on the side of a hill, a couple of 100 feet up, on a faraway island of Iona, off the coast of Scotland, and calling out red light to the trail leader up ahead to signal that I needed to take a break. So I found myself on the island of Iona because it is known as a pilgrimage, sacred site destination for many traditions, for Druids, pagans, Christians, Celts. And so Christianity was introduced to Iona by the arrival of St. Columba from Ireland in the year 560. And so pilgrims have come to Iona from Scotland and all over the globe for over 1,500 years. There's even a couple of legends about Iona that one, Macbeth of Shakespearean fame is buried there, and also that Mary, the mother of Jesus, even visited there. That one I'm not too sure about. So as a minister and spiritual director, I felt a call to go to Iona, and it was finally time for me to journey there last summer. Now, to get to Iona requires just about every major mode of transportation to get there. I flew from Richmond to Philadelphia to London to Glasgow. From Glasgow, took a 3-hour train ride to the coastal city of Oban, and then stayed there overnight. The next morning, I met up with my group. We made our little name tags for the week we were together, just like summer camp. And we took the first ferry across the bay to the Isle of Mull, and then across that island to the next coastal town, and took ferry number 2. But wait, after ferry number 1, we had a 2-hour bus ride across that island to the other coast, and then ferry number 2 to the island of Iona. So upon arrival on Iona, and over the first few days that we were there, our retreat leaders invited us into spiritual practices that would ground us into the place, ground us in our bodies. They invited us to be as embodied as possible while we were there, and embodied in a way that we could be open to whatever arose during our week there together and on that island. Sometimes together, sometimes alone. And so we called the 4 directions. We welcomed in the spirit of openness so that we would be open to whatever arose. We called in the spirit of compassion and loving kindness for ourselves and for each other. We called in the spirit of enoughness so that whatever we experienced was allowed. And then we called in the spirit of rest and grounding. And so with those practices in mind, it was time to go to our planned hike to the top of the highest peak on Iona, about 300 feet up. As we got to the front of the trail, our retreat leader said, okay, we're just going to go at our own pace, and we'll be all spread out on the trail. If anybody needs any assistance, just yell out red light up the line, and I'll come back if you need to. And so as we're kind of milling around, getting ready to head up, I looked up and, I thought, it doesn't look that bad. It's not that high. It's a fairly easy trail up the mountain, up the hill. I want to say mountain, but it really wasn't. It was just a hill. And so as I was looking around at the group that I was hiking with, I thought, okay, I'm a fair number of years younger than most of the people in this group, and I'm the only man. And so my cultural, and some might say toxic masculinity reared its head, and I thought, surely I won't be the one to call out red light in this group. And given how I started this story, you probably can guess who was the first and only person to call red light up that hill. That was me. And so when we got about halfway up, a familiar feeling started to arise. And it was familiar because I had this thing about driving over tall bridges. And you'll see the connection in a minute, hang with me. So a couple hours away from here, there's this bridge called the Norris Bridge over the Rappahannock onto the northern neck. I see some nods in the back there. So as I approached this bridge, some people call it the Nightmare Bridge, I've heard. As I approached this bridge for the first time, I'm none the wiser, but my body just goes into overdrive. My heart started beating out of my chest. I gripped that steering wheel as hard as I could. My breathing was just short and shallow and fast, and it just freaked me right out. And I stared a hole into the back of that bumper of the car in front of me, and I dared not look on either side. And it was all I could do to get over that bridge to the other side. And it's so narrow, and there's no place to pull over. There's no other choice. You just got to keep going. And so this is the feeling that started to arise about halfway up that mountain, that hill. Suddenly, it was not that treacherous a spot, but it just suddenly felt very open. And that's the thing about the bridge, it's just that open. There's nothing that you see even until you get over. And so it just felt very open and unsteady. And I started feeling that panic. It wasn't quite as bad as the bridge, but it started coming up. And so I thought, all right, I need to call red light. And my brain, my ego was like, okay, but the only thing that came out was red light. And so nobody heard. And so I finally got up enough energy and gumption to really yell out red light. And finally somebody heard, and they called up the line, and the retreat leader came back. Now in that particular moment, I was able to kind of do all of my usual spiritual toolkit items of, okay, slow down, breathe. I was able to get myself through it and didn't need a whole lot of intervention there, just needed to take a break. And I literally leaned into the mountain, literally grounding on the hill until I could kind of catch my breath, and then I could move on. And so we continued on a little higher up the mountain to our initial destination near the top. And when we got up there, it really opened up again. And the wind was so intense. And my backpack was a little too heavy, and I felt like I was going to be blown over and blown off at any moment, even though I was not near any ledges. And so that's when the full panic attack really hit. And I didn't need to call out red light then because we were all together, and our trip leader could tell that I was not doing well at all. And so she pulled me aside. She found a little niche for me out of the wind and started to kind of talk me down. And I needed her to talk me through it. I could not access it on my own in that moment, even though she was telling me the same things that I was telling myself just a few minutes before. We found another kind of crevice where I could sit down and eventually lie down in. She asked, instructed me to, okay, find that place within you that is, your core, your stability, and, just slow down. And so I put my hand on my belly to kind of feel my belly going in and out. And then I put my hands on either side of me, on the rocks on either side of me, and just felt that grounding into the earth and grounding into my center. And soon I was able to slow down, slow my breathing, and sit there. I could see everybody else kind of going up to the top and having the time of their lives. And for a brief moment, I thought, I can make it. It's just right there. And then the second thought was, no, you're good here. Let's just hang out. And I was able to calm down. And so a few minutes later, when everyone had kind of done their thing at the top, and we were ready to head back down the hill. And I was able to get back down without incident, and all was well. So as I reflected on that experience for the rest of that week and after returning home, the word vulnerability kept coming up over and over. And I realized that even though this was not the first, and I know by no means it will be the last, but this lesson of vulnerability really hit home, really hit me hard. And it was because first I had to realize that I needed help, that I couldn't, my brain was in fuzzy, foggy mode, and I couldn't access that spiritual toolkit. And then I had to say it out loud, red light, I need help. And then I had to receive the help. And so all of those spiritual practices from earlier in the week were starting to bear fruit, and I was open to myself knowing that I was in distress, and I was open to asking for help and receiving it. Something I don't ever do. And so it really hit home. And so when I got home at the end of that week and started telling this story to family and friends, often I would just burst into tears telling the story. And I think it was because it was touching that deep and tender place deep inside me that I don't share or show to anyone, even my family, very often. And so it was deep, and so kind of getting to that tender place became such a powerful affirmation for me that, lo and behold, I'm human, I have strengths, I have weaknesses, I can ask for help, and it's okay. Nobody cared. They offered the help, and then they went on and did what they were there to do. And so it was just such a powerful affirmation for me. And I needed that understanding a lot sooner than I thought I would. Shortly after I got back to Richmond, a few weeks later, someone in my family had a pretty serious health scare. And in trying to be that healing, caring presence and having all the answers, I was put right back in that place of not having any of the answers, in that place of uncertainty and anxiety. And it took me a while, but having just had that experience on the hill, I was able to remember, hey, wait, what did my trail leader say to me when I was going through that? Slow down, take a few deep breaths, find your center, find your core, ground yourself in the earth, call out red light. And so as I did that over the next few days, I cleared out my calendar. I took some time off of work. I cleared out my after-work activities at church and in the community. I reached out to the church care team to deliver food, something I had never done before, for a few days. I reached out to other ministers for support. I started going to therapy and counseling again. All these things, building out that care and support network that kind of led me from that experience on the hill. Now, I wish that I could say this was a one-time transition, one-time lesson learned, and I got it for the rest of my life. But of course, it never works out that way with us humans. And so a couple of months after I got back from the trip, I got my first and probably only tattoo right here of a labyrinth, in part as a daily reminder to stay on that spiritual path of pilgrimage, of practice. I paint my nails every now and then to remind me that masculinity can show up in many different ways. My daughter, after hearing this story, made a bracelet for me that says red light as a reminder to access my vulnerability more, to say red light when I need to. It says red light right here. And to ask for that help. And when I do that, that automatically builds compassion and empathy for myself, for all of you, for everyone. And goodness knows we need more empathy and compassion in this world today. And so the invitation for you, for me, is to go to those places of vulnerability. One of the responsibilities of going on pilgrimage is to bring back the boon, to share the treasure of what you're bringing back home. And so I tell this story, sharing my treasure of going into that vulnerability and knowing and remembering those spiritual practices to get through it, and sharing that vulnerability with others so that we can all increase in our compassion and empathy in that shared humanity that we all have together. So I hope to see you up here in the coming months, and I long to hear the treasure of your story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. I have to tell you a quick story about when I blacked out on the Norris Bridge. So when you were saying this, I too felt nervous on the inside immediately. And then when you said start to breathe and put your hand on your belly and feel the breath, there was a time driving across that Norris Bridge to Irvington. There was a construction. They had stopped traffic, and I had a full-blown panic attack. So all of the sympathy, but for all of us, right? We all have these vulnerable situations. If you haven't been on the Norris Bridge and you would like to experience that particular hell, please do so and report back and tell your story and how it went. Thanks for sharing, Robert. Our next storyteller is Cris Caruso. Cris is a recent Richmond transplant by way of 20 years in DC, though she forever remains a New Englander at heart. She owns a financial planning firm serving women and LGBTQ plus clients. When she's not working, she and her wonderful spouse, I added the wonderful because I love Tina, Tina are trying to stay one step ahead of their 100-year-old house, befriending other people's dogs, and falling for all the quirks and charms that Richmond has to offer. Cris, come up, tell us your root cause of your story, which is aptly titled Root Cause.
I'm going to ask for a little grace with my support paper here. But Saturday, February 29th, 2020, the transition that I never saw coming. I'd been dyeing my hair since my late 20s. The more respectable my jobs got and the more stubborn the gray got, the more often I did it. I work in a male-dominated field where appearance matters in a very specific yet impossible way. You want to look old enough to be taken seriously, but not too old. Polished enough to seem credible, but not so polished that people think you're trying too hard. Acceptable, relatable, all of it at the same time. Up until then, there had never been a good moment to stop. I had blown past every benchmark I had set for myself. 40, 45, 50, maybe at 50. I left the salon that day with my next appointment set for 5 weeks later, just like I had done 5 weeks before and the 5 weeks before that. That next appointment came and we pushed it out a few weeks because obviously this would all be over soon, right? You remember. May, and then June. My hairdresser, who is a very dear friend of mine, texted me, "You're considered essential. Why don't you just come in? We're taking all of the precautions that we can." I texted him back and I said, "I'm not that essential. Let the people who really need those spots have them. What I really was feeling is, this doesn't feel essential. Maybe I don't need to do this right now. For the first time, I could get away with a little more. Or maybe it was actually a little less. Some root spray, a ponytail, and honestly, we were all in the same boat. Everybody's grooming had gone DIY, pajama chic was all the rage, and sourdough starters were updates in daily headlines of group chats. August, I texted him, okay, it's time. But let me just see what's under there, no color this time. He said, are you sure? I said, no, but I can always come back next week if I hate it. I did not go back the next week or the week after that. That transition started with a pandemic and ended with a pixie cut, which felt less like a hairstyle and more like a small act of surrender. September 15, 2022. I sat outside on a gorgeous afternoon with my boss over smoothies. She thought we were there for a casual catch-up, end of summer, vacations, her kids, back to school, the usual. I don't remember what flavor my smoothie was. I just remember gripping it like it was an emotional support beverage, knowing I was about to blow up both of our days. I finally found an opening, a pause. I said as calmly as I could, I think it's time for me to move on to the next thing. And she lit up. I agree, she said. I have so many ideas, so many things we could do. My heart dropped. I realized that she thought that this was a professional development conversation, and I meant it as a breakup. Deep breath. No, I'm leaving. Silence. Her face changed so completely that I knew this was not going to have a graceful ending. 18 years sat between us on that tiny little table. 18 years of history, loyalty, identity, a huge chunk of my adult life. What had taken me years to muster the courage and confidence to believe was possible was suddenly going down in less than a minute. Arriving in that moment had taken years. Work, research, fact-finding, getting all of my ducks in a row, learning to trust myself to believe that I knew what I already knew. Some of the most pivotal transitions don't come from the outside, right? It's a tug, it's a whisper. It's that inner voice that says this ending, or this is ending, long before you were brave enough to say it out loud. And yes, there were attorneys involved. And yes, it was as awful as any divorce I could imagine. Do I regret it? Not one single moment. Because that transition taught me something that the gray hair had only hinted at. Sometimes the hardest part of a change is not the leap, it's the admitting to yourself what you already know. And once I knew I could trust that voice, it changed everything. Late December 2024, my spouse and I left Washington, D.C. and landed in Richmond. And when I say landed, I mean shortly after arrival, Richmond welcomed us with an ice storm and a water outage. Welcome. But still, we couldn't have been happier. We were so excited to be here. The life we had built in DC had changed. It had been good to us. It had served its purpose, but it no longer fit the life we wanted. After 2 years of figuring out how to run a business, rebuilding, growing, and doing an intense amount of self-exploration, we asked ourselves a totally different question. If we could go anywhere, where would we go? And what we wanted turned out to be pretty simple. Closer to family, not further. A house, no more shared walls. A small yard. I had become very fond of growing things we like to eat. A lot less traffic, a slower pace, and seeds of community. Gone were the days of moving to new cities without knowing a soul. We've both done it over and over. Friends, meeting people in midlife is hard. Our DC life had been a good life, but Richmond was the first place that matched the vibe that we were trying to build next. We had family here, we had friends, those very seeds we knew we couldn't move without. We found a magical old house in a delightful neighborhood. Our house, she's 100 years old, and honestly, she'll have her own transition story to tell someday. But right now, when I think about transition, I don't think of it as one dramatic leap. I think of it as learning to recognize your own life while it is trying to change you. Sometimes it looks like gray roots. Sometimes it sounds like, no, I'm leaving. And sometimes it looks like landing in Richmond during an ice storm with no running water and thinking, oh, we're finally home.
And I am so glad you're here, because now I get to know Tina. Our next storyteller is Sid Crosby. Sid was born and raised in Richmond. Film, music, and writing are the main things that keep her sane. When she isn't working on a script or escaping into another reality with a book, you can catch her when she goes out at night or at a cozy coffee shop in the morning. Please help me welcome Sid to the stage to tell her story, Broken Hearted Party Girl.
I'm going to be very vulnerable up here, so if you see me drowning in my own tears, don't save me. I'm fine. I lost my mother. It'll be 1 year this Friday. She was born segregated south in Emporia. I wish I asked more about the racial drama that she had experienced, because I know that she unintentionally passed it down to me. I am her only daughter. Favoritism was immediate. My twin brother realized it way before I did. I asked her on her deathbed if she ever wanted kids. She said no. I asked her if she ever wanted a daughter. If that was the case, she said absolutely. In 2019, she was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. I knew then that this might be the end, but I didn't want that to be the case. Obviously, we're all going to be as positive as we can. She'll get the surgeries done. She'll go through chemotherapy, she will go through remission, and she'll have some sort of life again, you know? She was a painter. She could do that. She could go to Michael's and Hobby Lobby and be fine. She still did that even after the surgeries that impaired her walking, even after the surgeries that impaired her talking. And the remission hit, and we were happy. We thought, we're gonna keep her. Stacy Toole. Tuel. Haitian. 2 years later, cancer came back even more aggressively than we could have imagined. Wonderful team of doctors, of course, but they said more surgeries, more surgeries, more surgeries. Let's cut. Let's just cut. Her jaw, her tongue, skin grafts all over her legs. Complete mutilation of her body to the point where I did not recognize her. I watched her feel unsafe. She texted me in the middle of the night saying that I don't feel safe here. She's meant to sit in her own filth. They said that the only way that she could possibly get out of the situation is to have someone at home with her 24/7. She's not an only child. She has 6 sisters, but they are all in their own stages of life, of getting older, of having their own health problems. My oldest aunt did it before. The first time, she could not do it again, so all eyes were on me. I am not an only child. I am the only daughter. So of course, it'll be me. It's my job. It was my job, and that's what was told to me all the time by my male brothers. I had a brother who lived with me. Any help, any sort of support would have been amazing, but no, I witnessed every single bit of degradation that she went through. Even when she was at the hospital, I witnessed nurses who did not care for their jobs be careless with her pain, so I held her. And I said that I'll do it. Of course, why would I want to leave her in a situation like that? I will do it. I will leave my job. I will leave my friends. I will leave my apartment, and I will not be financially secure for almost 9 months of my life. 24/7, every day. So I learned how to give medications. I learned how to do trach care. I learned how to do wound care. I learned how to do physical therapy. I learned how to change diapers. I learned, and I hated it. Sometimes I hated her. And because of that, I hated myself. We would cry with each other probably almost every night. She never cried while she raised me. I saw her once cry at her own mother's funeral, but that was just one tear. But this is how I know that she knew. So we can hold each other and be the mother and daughter that I feel like we could have always been. Because she didn't mean to be emotionally neglectful. That's her mother to her, down to me. But she loved me probably more than this point, the favoritism is correct, more than her children, more than her other 2 sons. Because this is what I am doing. She did not want me to do it, but I had no choice. I took her pills because I couldn't sleep. The oxy was probably the best feeling that I've ever had in my life. Being able to sleep soundlessly, peacefully, just to have to wake up the next morning and do it all over again. And I hated myself for that too. I needed a break. At this point, it had been months and months, and mentally, it wasn't happening anymore. I could not take it. I will yell, and I will say things to her that I never thought I would say, or feel things that I never thought I would feel. Social worker said there's a nice respite stay that she can go to for about a week or so. And then that will be your break. You can have that time, and then she'll come back. I said, perfect. My mom loves being in her own house. She wants to be in her own space, in her own bed, watch her own TV shows. She didn't want to go, but she knew that I needed that. I wish that if I knew that morning before I gave her her final dose of pain medication just so she could be able to get out of the bed, that's the last time that I would see my mother's eyes open. Because the very next day, we got a call from a nurse saying, this is the time. She is fully transitioning now. We have her comfortable, we have her on morphine, all the good drugs, you know? But that wasn't what was supposed to happen. I was supposed to have more time, and this was the time. These 8 months was the time, but I didn't. And so a week later, my mom is dead. She would always communicate with me through facial expressions because she couldn't speak because of the trach, you know? Or she would write on a whiteboard. And even though she couldn't open her eyes, she knew I was there because she could hear my voice. We were in the respite stay and I was holding her and she could barely breathe. She could hear my voice. I knew it because she would do that facial expression that we would do, just a little lift of the eyebrows, just a little, you know, her eyes are closed and she's just like, and I'm just like, and I saw her become a shell of her former self. I saw her become a shell of that bright woman that created this bright woman. And then the logistics afterwards happened so quickly. So quickly. We had to sell the house. We couldn't stay there. I had to find a job. I didn't have any money. I had to figure out everything. And then once I had a home and I was back near my friends. I was back in a city in Richmond that I love, that this is where my found family is. I'm a party girl by nature. I will be in my mom's living room while she is passed out from medications with the headphones on blast, with the most infuriating synth music you've ever heard, just do, 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 because I need to feel alive again. I've never felt more like less of a person. Like, I felt like I was the ghost haunting that house. And so now, yeah, you can find me out because I need to make the dance floor my meeting ground. I need to put that in my nose. I need to put that pill inside me. I need to smoke that joint. I need to drink. I need to feel the lights on me. I need to move. I need the sweat and the tears to commingle. I need your body against mine. I need to be out until 5 a.m. I need it because anything else means that it's always gonna find me later. That pain's gonna creep up. That pain's gonna choke me to death. But I'm not afraid of any death anymore because that's where she is. My mom is dead. I turned 30 years old, and 1 month later, my mom died. I turned 31 in February. The year anniversary, March 27th. Every day, I live for Stacy Toole because she gave me this face that's like hers. I look just like her. I will continue to do the things that she wanted to do. I will travel. I will get on that plane. I will take that trip. I will paint that thing. I will sing that song, and I will write that movie because she would have wanted me to. She would not have wanted me to stop the life that she gave me. And I'll do it all again just to see her, just to feel her skin on mine. So I go out at night, the broken-hearted party girl that I am, until 7 in the morning, because if I don't, I will remember that my mother is dead. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid, for sharing that beautiful story.
Thank you for listening, everyone.
And now I'm going to cry as well. Thank you for sharing. Our next wonderful speaker is Deirdre Fouquet. Deirdre is a New York City expat who moved to Richmond 3 years ago to work in state government while finishing her PhD in social movement studies. In her free time, Deirdre loves cooking and baking for her wonderful Richmond found family, investing in her community and in her spiritual life, and going on new adventures with her partner and 2 dogs. Deirdre's story is called A First Glimpse at the Horizon. Please, let's welcome Deirdre to the stage.
Sorry. Okay.
Feel free to move anything.
That's great. So I'm a trans woman. I don't normally start out conversations that way. Well, that's not entirely true.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I did. So anyway, okay, cool. Trans woman. Based on the number of people who come up to me and are like, "You're so tall," I do think people have figured it out, maybe. And I'm 6 feet. I'm not that tall. But anyway, I want to start out my broad story with a more specific story that I recently kind of recollected myself. Back when I was about 16, I found an old family album with some of the few baby pictures I've actually found of myself, in which this was pre-transition, of course, in which I was a baby after a bath, so somewhat clothes deprived. And I took a pair of scissors and I, let's say, gave myself spontaneous bottom surgery in those pictures. A couple years later, Mom found that photo album. She was like reasonably upset. And I was like, I don't know why I did that. It just felt like the right thing to do. It took me 14 years later to figure out I was a trans woman. A lot of like stories about being trans kind of focus on the dysphoria, focus on the, you know, man in a mirror staring at himself and being like, I'm such a monster. I don't really want to do that, but like, suffice to say, honestly, dysphoria, at least for me, everyone has different experiences, it was kind of boring. It was just sort of nothingness, like stretching in all directions. I just didn't really feel like anyone at all. I remember telling my now ex-wife that I felt kind of like a cloud that didn't really have a body, felt disembodied, one might say, didn't have a relationship with my body is the point. And another way I say this is like, you're kind of in a hall of mirrors and you see different versions of yourself that maybe you would want or could be, and you just don't have anyone to get there with you, or you don't have a version of yourself you trust to take you there, and that's kind of how it felt the entire time. Then eventually, I decided to transition, or at least I figured it out. I got started on the pathway. I remember my, again, ex-wife talking to me about my gender exploration or desire to explore like non-binariness, and asked if I wanted to dress maybe a little bit more feminine. And I said, this is slightly problematic, I will say now. I didn't want to be a man in a dress. I just kind of wanted to be a woman. And then 2 years later, I actually started that. What's kind of, I think, interesting about the actual process of transition is it's easy to think of something like that as this big moment where you are finally starting. And it was, again, kind of unexceptional. I just like woke up one day and I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing now. It didn't feel inevitable so much as it just, that's what I was doing. I just had to be doing it. Fortunately, everything else in my life had changed around that time when I moved to Richmond with my 2 dogs, who were very confused by this process, I will say. I think I smelled a bit different. And like, I got started. And the weirdest thing to think about from that time, 2.5 to almost 3 years later, is that I just don't really feel like that person anymore. That is sort of an alien creature to me. And there's definitely a lot of weird resentments to who I was. They're kind of a little embarrassing, but one of the most like beautiful feelings I have associated with that time and that person is that they kind of chose to sacrifice themselves, almost like a ritual to make me possible, because I do just feel like a different person. That person is almost sort of dead. It's a very weird feeling, but kind of like spiritual and beautiful at the same time. But like, to fast forward through transition or not, you know, you never really get to the end of it. I spent, 2.5 years getting on estrogen, doing all the surgeries, going through medical hell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, having my body medicalized, all of that. And then now I'm sort of at the boring part. After all of the big moments, the exceptional moments have happened. And at the same time, that's its own stage. I think one of the weird things about being trans, having the trans identity, is that you never actually fully transition. I mean, you're a trans woman. The transition is in the name. It's always kind of something you're seen to have to earn or to accomplish. And like, there's something kind of beautiful about that, right? Like, we're all people who are becoming something else. We're all moving through time. None of us are just like stuck creatures. At the same time, though, it is a lot of pressure. You feel like you constantly have to be working on something, and that this thing that's so central to your identity that other people can just kind of take for granted is something that can be taken away from you at any moment. And like, just existing in the world as, I do now in the current climate, it does feel a bit like it is taken away from me from time to time. Just, you know, an innocent interaction with someone can kind of, as my partner can attest to, can kind of make my day a little rough, I'll say. But like, that's the complexity about being where I am at in transition, the almost sort of boring part, the part where people start directly gendering me and I start self-conceptualizing consistently or all the time as a woman, is that you can get lost in other people's narratives. There's so many narratives about being trans, of course, like everything from the more malicious stuff, like, you know, perverts, mentally ill, to like being someone's fetish, which going from a, you know, cis man, the most like default identity, to something of a, I'll say fetish category is not great, not fun, generally speaking. But yeah, and then, but there's even the more benevolent like categorizations of, or stories about trans women that is like, we're almost sort of magical creatures, or we're these like benevolent gender fairies. My partner and I refer to it as manic pixie trans girl, and that's sort of true. And the problem becomes trying to find yourself amid that complexity. And what's so interesting about that is, for the first time in my life, I do feel like a specific person. I feel someone who has been like embodied, who's connected to my physical form, who can move through the world and like feel the air on my face. Not everything feels disconnected or abstracted or distant. And at the same time, I'm just completely beset upon by all of these various narratives about who I am, who I should be, including even sometimes from my own community. There's a lot of pressure to be the right type of trans woman, or the wrong type of trans woman, as the case may be. And, you know, being a not poly trans woman, that's tough for anyone who knows the trans community. It's apparently 50% of Richmond. So many. And that brings me to the title of my story itself. It's that transition wasn't so much about how other people see me. It wasn't even so much about getting the right gender identity. It was about becoming a person who, for the first time, was capable of making choices in my life, who was capable of kind of, you know, approaching those visions of myself in the mirror and walking up to them and actually trusting myself to become that person, to even just try that person on, to be competent enough, confident enough to move through the world. And that's what I mean when I say like this first glimpse of the horizon. It's not arriving at a place, it's finally being at a place to make choices and decide who I'm going to be. Thank you.
I don't know. I'm gonna hold it. Thank you so much, Deirdre. I too have some notes. So for the final storyteller this evening, it is the one and only me. So I get to introduce myself. Which is fun, because when Meg sent me the notes for this, it said the grand finale, the one, the only, and I was like, I can't really say that. I guess I could, and it's me. I'm Michelle Mercurio. I'm a strategist and a coach, and what I call an authenticist, which is just a word that I made up to let people know that I think you should be more of who you are and less of what the world expects you to be. My jobs, I will say jobs, manifest in two different ways. I do brand identity and strategy for visionaries and for companies who are looking to reclaim who they are. But maybe some of you also know I have this witchy side of me. And I help lead experiences and coach people who are evolving in their own humanity as well. So you might recognize me as the former host of Richmond Creative Mornings for the past 5 years. Turned that over to the incomparable Lindsay George last fall. And the whole CMRVA community is here as well. And I think that when I was thinking about my story for tonight and the topic of transition, it was more about coming home than it was about what it meant to go away. So, I too am going to have a little bit of some notes just in case. I feel a little bit more secure if the papers are right there. The first time I left Richmond, it was with the intent to never return. It was February, it was cold, and an Arctic blast had just made its way through the city. I was leaving work late. I had 3 bags slung over my shoulders because I always carried everything all of the time, all by myself, with no help from anyone ever. Yes, emotionally as well. And I was on crutches. So that did not bode well for where this story is headed. I walked out into the parking lot, made my way to the car, fished around my bag for my keys, pulled them out, and promptly fell flat on my ass. It started to snow. And at this point, I looked up at the sky and I realized that this was over. This, in this case, was my life in Richmond. I had a great job that I'll put in quotes. It checked all the boxes, but it felt hollow and meaningless. I had a lot of wonderful friends, but many of them had familial attachments and more security in their lives because I was somebody, instead of looking for attachments that served me, was in love with somebody who was not available at all. So I knew that even though I had only been in Richmond for 3 years, that it was now or never. I started to open up different doors. A lot of different opportunities came my way, and the one that I landed squarely back into was moving back home to Arizona from whence I came. I started teaching at an alternative high school. These were students who landed in this school, particular school, because they either opted out of traditional education or they were opted out by their administrations and or law enforcement. I had never set foot in a classroom before. So this led to some very interesting transitions from going from this corporate world where I felt very competent and in charge to being in front of a classroom of teenagers who were feral. And it led me to saying things like, Javier, put your pants back on. This is not the time or place for that. Jorge, I understand that you're upset that that restaurant owner ditched our school and wouldn't serve our class, but we don't just take care of people who no longer, who aren't supportive of us. Rachel, I understand that I'm a fucking bitch, but if you don't calm down and opt back into your classwork, we're gonna have to move this into the hallway and maybe to the administration. Mari, you cannot kick someone's ass just because they looked at your boyfriend. And then later that month, Mari, you can't kick someone's ass just because they looked at your girlfriend. There were a lot of conversations that were happening during this time. And these moody, beautiful, bright, boisterous, angry, unsupported children, right, were part of my day-to-day existence at this point. And while there were so many good memories, I think they taught me more than what I taught them. There were also a lot of hard moments. There were the moments when gunshots were being peppered through the front of the school and we were hiding kids in the back. There was a family of students that were living in the back parking lot because they were unhoused. There was the time the girl was dealing cocaine in the bathroom and got taken away to jail. There were pregnancies, miscarriages, rapes, violence beyond measure. There were also just kids looking for a place where they can be seen, held, and heard and supported in the systems and schools that were failing them. The teachers banded together, and one of those teachers, Mr. Woodcox, was the cool, calm, collected, cute history teacher 2 hallways over from me. And he and I were friends, first and foremost. And then all of a sudden, one Valentine's Day, I got a balloon and a stuffed kangaroo delivered to my room from one of our students. They were having a little fundraiser for prom. And all of the kids are like, ooh, Miss M, Mr. W likes you. And I'm like, yeah, I like him too. By prom, we were engaged. And by November later that year, we were married. We were off to start our own lives in our Arizona home and get busy with this whole, let's have kids, let's have suburbia, let's have a house, let's do the things. Flash forward 9 years and 9 months later. I'm standing in the airport in Chicago O'Hare, and I'm getting ready to board a flight to DC. I'm working in corporate, we're living in Virginia. Kevin and I had moved back to, well, me back to Virginia, to Fredericksburg, and him for the first time moving to Virginia so that we could continue to pursue all of the things, right? I returned to corporate. We figured if we were gonna have kids, one of us had to make money and we couldn't both be school teachers. But after a lot of different things that happened between infertility, failed adoptions, failed public adoptions that were pretty painful, and the death of our nephew as he was being born, we were weathered, we were taken aback, and we hardly knew one another. So here I am, I'm in Chicago, I'm traveling almost every week for work. This is my escape, this is me getting out, this is me going to do things. This is me trying to have it all. And I realize as I'm wheeling my way to the gate in O'Hare, hot tears are streaking down my face, just as they were that night in Richmond. And all I could think about was, this is not working. This part is over. And this, in this case, was my marriage, quite possibly my corporate career, because this job was not the thing. Every way that I was living in suburbia and what I was trying to do with my life, this was over. So, got on that plane, landed in DC, had dinner with some friends, pretended like nothing was wrong, drove home. That night, I texted a friend in Richmond and said to her, hey, I'm leaving. And she said, why don't you just come here and you can stay with me and figure things out. Next day, I packed my car, and after a very difficult conversation with Kevin and a more difficult conversation with my mother, who did not approve and definitely took Kevin's side, and for any of you who have met Kevin, you understand probably why. He's a pretty fabulous person. There's the spoiler alert for this story. I packed the car and I moved to Richmond, and as I drove down 95, I thought to myself, here I am again. And this time, I'm going home to Richmond again. So in Richmond, I land, and I'm sitting there, and my friend has a wonderful home in Churchill, and I'm looking at the city, and I'm loving the fact that I am in this, once again, vibrant city. It has changed since the last time I lived here. Really enjoyed being here. And I sat a lot, and I journaled, and I cried those same tears. And I'm thinking, this this feels like the right place. I ran away from here before. We ran away from Phoenix. I ran away from Fredericksburg. But this is the place that I want to be. And I set about doing that really difficult work, you know, the inner work, the work that's ugly and snot-filled and crying, and you're wondering if anything's ever going to be okay again. And in that time, surprisingly, I found out while I was doing that primarily for me, my husband was in Fredericksburg doing that for him as well. So flash forward again to almost a year to the date later, and Kevin and I moving to Richmond. We had decided at that point that the transition that was most needed was the fact that we weren't going to live what we thought we should live. We didn't think that we needed to have the things that we originally thought. We realized we were living in a different marriage. And so our move to Richmond and to Churchill, almost actually 10 years ago, 10 years and 3 months ago, culminated in the fact that instead of running away from lives that weren't working for us, that we were going to redo and rebuild and create stories that were actually ours. So it has been 10 years and 3 months here in Richmond. It's been 8 years since I left my corporate job and started my own business. It's been almost 22 years since we got engaged right before prom, and I'm really glad that that last transition led to coming home. Thank you.
Let's keep it going for Michelle. Not only a great story, but a great MC this evening. Thank you so much. Let's give it up for all the storytellers that you heard tonight. This theme tonight was transitions, but it just as easily could have been called vulnerability. That was, I think, the common theme through a lot of these stories tonight, was people being brave enough to share some really important and challenging and, transitionary moments in their lives. And I want to thank all of you for doing that for us. It's really important we get to see this side of people's lives, so that we understand that all of us have our challenges and our struggles and our transitions, and that it's okay to let the world in a little bit. That's one of our storytellers talked about, allowing for vulnerability. It's so important. I just have a couple things. First off, if you've been taking pictures tonight, if you want to post about this event, please use the VOXRVA hashtag. You can also follow us on all the socials, VOXRVA_stories, or just search VOXRVA, you'll find us. It's easy enough. Make sure to keep an eye out for the information about our next event, which should be at the new Cabaret Theater in Chocolate Bottom Dream House. It's where the Transitions event in January was supposed to be initially, but we worked it out, so we are still going back there. They've been great working with us to figure out stuff. So that'll be April 22nd. We'll be announcing the theme and the MC and all that other stuff in the near future. Before we go, I have an announcement that I also guess is a little bit of a story. The roots of VOXRVA stem back to about a decade ago in Richmond. In 2015, I started my first podcast called Geeks Under the Influence. It's not an overly creative title. It was geeks drinking beer, and so, but it was about sharing each other's fandoms. We would have different episodes about Doctor Who or a lot of Star Wars, and we had people come on to talk about things that they loved, and it was like celebrating your fandoms. And though it wasn't a particularly original idea, our niche was not gatekeeping. It was allowing people to like things at their pace. So no matter if you were deeply in it or just beginning to discover it, it was a place for everybody to really celebrate their love and their interests and their passions in one common place. Now, what that turned into was crossovers with other podcasts at the time, and there were only like 5 in 2015. There weren't a lot of podcasts yet in Richmond. We started guesting on each other's shows. We got written up in, I think, RVA Magazine about just the beginnings of local podcasting in Richmond. And that inspired by 2016 for me to start a group on Facebook groups, remember those? Called the RVA Community of Podcasters. And it was just a place, when I started podcasting, first episode, April 20th, 2015, 420, I know, a little on the nose. I didn't know how to do anything, and it sucked. It sucked. And the first 41 episodes of the podcast aren't even available online because the audio's so bad. We didn't know what we were doing. It took a long time to figure out. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have somebody to help me figure out how to do this podcasting thing. And what I wanted to do is at least create some sort of support system for people that were discovering their own creativity in the Richmond community. So that's where RVA Community of Podcasters started. That has grown to about 300 members on that Facebook group. In addition to that, we would do regular meetups. That kind of got hampered as of COVID, like everything did. And then after talking with Steve and Meg and some other people in town about the need for us to have these meetups again, we all joined forces and started doing more regular meetups. That's when we determined that it wasn't just podcasters that needed that support system. We needed support for storytellers and YouTubers and TikTokers, videographers and photographers and stand-up comics and performers. These are nowadays not these little gated communities that don't talk with one another. These oftentimes overlap. And so it makes sense to have a community that really supports all of them at the same time. And that's where VOXRVA came from. Now, as we continued to do VOXRVA, the popularity of our storytelling events really took off right away. So this is your fault for coming to these events. No, we appreciate it. It's incredible. We haven't had a big storytelling community in Richmond for a little while, and so it's really great to have that back and have all of you here and excited to hear these amazing stories. But unfortunately, because of all the focus on getting these live events together, a lot of the opportunities for creating resources and supporting these local creators has been relatively limited, just based on the focus on the storytelling part. But until now, we're expanding VOXRVA in a way that we can focus on both at the same time. VOXRVA is not going anywhere. We're still going to be doing monthly events, still going to have amazing storytellers coming up here and talking, but I will be stepping away as the host of VOXRVA, still be coming and telling stories, being involved in the community, to start what we're calling Richmond Generate. Richmond Generate is a community website and, a number of other things. We've got it right here. That we are a collective of digital creators, performers, artists, and entertainers from Richmond, Virginia. The purpose of this community is to elevate and support area creatives through education, mentorship, community enrichment, and networking. This community is for creators of all experience levels and disciplines. Welcome. Also, this community is not for makers of AI-generated content. I want to be very clear on that one. The most important and challenging and exciting art are the ones that we make ourselves. And so that's what we want to celebrate here in Richmond with the VOXRVA storytelling events, with Richmond Generate. We want to create a community of people that can get together, that we can talk about the things that we love doing, that we love creating, and it's more about creating it for an algorithm. It's about creating it for ourselves and our community. And so that's what we're going to do at Richmond Generate. When you sign up, you can create a profile, you can message other creators on the community database. There's a forum, old school style, forums, where you can go in and post about things that you're doing, about events that are happening, about questions that you have. There's different groups for podcasters and video and performers, so you can get with other people that are in your same discipline. This is a great way for us all to really build up our own creative spirit while supporting people around us. So if you are a creator or are interested in being one, again, no gatekeeping here, sign up, create a profile. We're not gonna test you on it. You can just create one, it's fine. But also tell people in your life that are creators. This only works if we are all helping each other and being part of this amazing community. And I wanna thank all of you for being part of the community of storytellers here tonight at VOZ. And I know during the week it can be tough. This has been so inspiring, and we will find you next month. I'll be there in the crowd. with you next month at Dreamhouse. We'll find you next time, and make sure to just scan the QR or look up generaterva.com to get on the new website. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Thank you, Richmond. Your city, your stories. This is VOXRVA.